Today, we're checking out 5 of the craziest SAS operations. I'm looking forward to this because we've seen how crazy the SAS can get when you're talking about training, when you're talking about a one-man wrecking crew in Nairobi. We've seen the work of the SAS, and we've heard about them in the comments from you guys.
Yeah, I feel like we've been kind of leading up to understanding more about them, so now it'd be cool to actually see them in action.
Yeah, exactly. So without further ado, let's get into the craziest SAS operations.
The British Special Air Service, or SAS, are an icon of awe and wonder in popular culture. Widely regarded as the best special forces outfit on Earth.
The best.
Tales of their antics enthrall all, both for the breadth of their bravery and the sheer absurdity of the odds that they overcome time and time again. Now today we're going to dive headfirst into 4 such crazy occasions, from high-stakes shootouts in central London to battles against militias deep in the African jungle to fights against nature herself. And through it, we're going to see for ourselves just how the SAS earned its most idolized place in the public consciousness.
Let's
get
do it.
started.
Side projects. Let's go,
If we had to
Nimrod.
discuss crazy SAS operations, there can be no better place to start than the one that revealed them to the world and etched the stereotypical image of the SAS trooper as an MP5-wielding, gas mask-wearing, black-clad unit of a man into the public consciousness, and that's Operation Nimrod, better known as the Iranian embassy siege. The events that led to the siege began on April the 30th, when 6 armed men...
I think our commenters were talking about this one.
Okay.
The embassy siege. I think you guys were specifically mentioning this one. I don't know if there's another video that's going to dive deeper into that specific event, maybe. So if it doesn't touch on the details that we need to know about, make sure you let us know down low in the comments.
Iranian embassy siege. The events that led to the siege began on April the 30th, when 6 armed men stormed the Iranian embassy in London, taking 26 people hostage. They were members of the Democratic Revolutionary Front for the Liberation of Arabistan, a militant group that fought for the independence of Khuzestan, a province in Iran. The situation was as tense as it was volatile, with hostages including embassy staff, visitors, and a police officer. At first, the British government was restrained in its response. They had a firm policy of not risking escalation in such events. So long as none of them started shooting, the standoff would continue. The hostage takers, unaware that the government's merciful graces were the only thing keeping them alive, then made a fatal miscalculation on the 6th day of the standoff. They killed Abbas Lavasani, the embassy's chief press officer, and threw his body through the window as a warning to the British government. The SAS were unmuzzled and told to go and get stuck in. The operation began with a carefully orchestrated symphony of chaos. As the sun began to wane, the SAS troopers, shrouded in their signature black gear, emerged like phantoms from the rooftop. The embassy, a building that had stood as a diplomatic haven, was about to become a battleground. With precision that comes only from brutal and relentless training and an unwavering resolve, the SAS initiated their assault. One team abseiled down the building's facade using bombs and a sledgehammer. Simultaneously, another team blew up skylights on the roof and dropped in, ensuring the hostage takers suddenly found themselves surrounded by explosions on all angles and totally overwhelmed by chaos. Through the basement, 2 more teams entered at that same moment, to act as a little surprise for any hostage takers who thought the lack of explosions in that direction signaled a path to freedom. The penetrating teams seized the initiative and advanced without hesitation, floor by floor, room by room, hunting for the hostage takers. And when they found them, they poured tear gas and smoke grenades into the room before they even had time to process that they were under fire.
We're not playing around.
This approach was a clever one. Having already killed Lavasani, the troopers were working under the assumption that the second the hostage takers knew they were under fire, they would turn their guns on their hostages, and this overwhelming strategy was intended to render them incapable of doing so. In one particularly dramatic incident, a hostage taker found himself with an overwhelming urge to meet back up with his fallen mate sooner rather than later, and so he appeared carrying a hand grenade, loudly announcing his plans to pull the pin and take everyone in the room to the grave with him. He'd probably seen too many movies, however, because his monologue was not met with a monologue in response by the troopers. Instead, one of them simply pivoted on the spot, pushed him down a staircase to get him away from the hostages before 3 further troopers emptied their magazines into him. Ultimately, 5 of the 6 hostage takers were killed in the embassy, with the final one opting to hide among the hostages and try to sneak his way to freedom. Unfortunately for him, his plan came undone, courtesy of the many wrinkles on the brains of the SAS planners, who had everybody pulled from the embassy, handcuffed and held in the back garden until all of the hostage takers, alive or dead, could be accounted for. Naturally, the genuine hostages were quite keen to foil his little scheme, and so he was immediately fingered and thrown in the back of a police van. All in all, the operation was a huge success. 23 of the 26 hostages were recovered alive and well, having suffered injuries no greater than ringing ears, courtesy of the flashbangs, and itchy eyes, courtesy of the tear gas. One man, Ahmad Dadgar, was an embassy staffer who was shot 6 times by hostage takers but incredibly survived his injuries. And tragically, one man, an embassy staffer named Ali Akbar Samadezdar, was killed. Given the odds, however, everyone was thrilled with this result. It's undoubtedly tragic, but it's also a very good outcome.
That's wild.
Wow, so crazy. I can see why you guys are saying that we need to check that out, because that's execution. It's a strategy. I love that he used the emphasis of description of chaos, that they created chaos and then they took advantage of that.
Yeah.
That in itself is the strategy, right?
Yeah.
They create the chaos, but they're so tactical. They know exactly what they're planning to do and how they're going to go about doing it. And then, something that we've seen from all these elite special forces is just the execution process, that they're just so pinpoint accurate on everything that they do. They don't make mistakes. And that's why you see that so many people survived, because, if you make a mistake in that moment, things can go downhill really, really quickly, because they're holding hostages. They can make, a decision that alters the fate of so many different people. But because they're so, fine-tuned with every single decision that they make, it reduces the casualties, and that's why you send them in an operation like that.
Well, yeah, and I think that the speed too, right? Like, they act quickly, so all they really need is that little bit of confusion for the hostage takers so that they can take advantage of the situation, right? And I think the thing that also stands out to me is that, their strategy, like, they have their strategy, but they're also thinking about it from all angles, right? Like, they're thinking about it from up top, from below, like, and being like, okay, like, what is every possible outcome that could happen so we can cover every angle?
Yeah.
So let's stay with the theme of hostage rescues for this section and have a look at Operation Barras, a hostage rescue mission the SAS executed in Sierra Leone in the year 2000. The hostages in question were 5 British soldiers of the Royal Irish Regiment and their Sierra Leonean liaison officer, who had been ambushed on the 25th of August and taken hostage by the West Side Boys, a local militia group most well known for their affinity for flip-flops, women's wigs, child soldiers, wanton torture, and being perpetually off their nut on all manner of substances. The British, led by Lieutenant Colonel Simon Fordham, had attempted negotiations. But on account of all the substances and the West Side Boys' tangible grip on reality that stemmed therefrom, these didn't go anywhere. So, with no peaceful option anywhere on the horizon, the British government authorized an SAS assault. It began with the deployment of reconnaissance teams who snuck up to the West Side Boys' stronghold and began taking note of what they saw, creating a perfect map of the area that noted every defensive position, every hut, every ditch, every tree line, truly everything, so that the troopers knew exactly what they'd be walking into, and as such could create the perfect plan to get in, get it done, and get out with minimum casualties. With that done,
it's impressive.
It was go time. And in the early hours of the 10th of September, a squadron made up of RAF Lynx and Chinook helicopters, all bristling with guns and stuffed to capacity with troopers, took off from the British base in the town of Hastings and began making the 15-minute flight to the West Side Boys' stronghold. But rather than storming straight in, they held downstream for a time in order to give the reconnaissance teams time to move into effective ambush positions before the whir of their blades and the drone of their turbines announced their presence. And then, when those teams radioed in to say that they were set up and staring at the West Side Boys down their scopes, the pilots collectively jammed their flight sticks into the canopies and moved in. They flew fast, and they flew low, their fuselages barely clearing the canopy of trees below. This was for 2 reasons. Firstly, it helped keep them obscured on their approach, but secondly, and more importantly, it meant that when they penetrated the perimeter of the stronghold, the mighty downdraft their blades generated was directed straight down onto the roofs of the shacks below, blowing them clean off, including the one where the captives were being held. Then, with the route to the hostages secured, the Chinooks began circling the stronghold and emptied their M134 miniguns and L7 GPMGs into anything that moved, and the Lynxes fanned out and used their missile pods to quickly reduce the many heavy weapons that lay around the area to scrap. The West Side Boys, who survived the initial onslaught, found it all rather egregious, so a few of them quickly moved to deny the attackers their prize by killing the hostages, but the second they started towards the hut holding them, AKs in hand, they fell to the ground dead, dropped by the reconnaissance team who had been keeping their scopes trained on them in case of this very eventuality. Then, with their machine guns now empty, the Chinooks hit the ground and deployed their troopers. A surprising number of West Side Boys were still alive and kicking, and so a fierce firefight erupted. Undeterred, and with steely resolves, the troopers steadily pushed them back, their top-of-the-line equipment and world-beating training making the unorganized and intoxicated militants resisting them of little challenge, and soon enough the fight was won. And what a victory it was, as not only were all 6 hostages rescued, battered and bruised, but very much still alive, but also all of the surviving West Side Boys, including their leader, Fidei Kali, were captured and taken into custody, destroying the once feared militant group in an instant.
Nice.
Tragically, however, the victory, although overwhelming, was somewhat pyrrhic, as Trooper Bradley Tinian was struck by a stray round during the firefight and did not survive his injuries, making him the only British death of the operation.
So, I mean, they did this, I guess, in the embassy as well, ensuring that they know the structure, the building and all that. But I imagine they would have, had to, in both instances, move pretty quickly in deciding the tactical awareness that they want to utilize related to the strategic, the structure and the terrain. And, we just saw that right there that he was talking about. They kind of mapped everything out, knew exactly how they were going to do it, but they would have had to do it in a time crunch, right? Because you obviously have hostages there and you don't want to delay things too long. So I think that's, something not to be overlooked. So again, we're seeing the execution top tier, right?
Yeah, the thing that really stood out to me in that was really cool was in the reconnaissance mission, like they made note of literally every tree line, every ditch, so these people going into it would know exactly what to expect, which I think
preparation.
Yeah, which reduces the chance for any error. It's also I'd just be interested in how some of this stuff works is obviously they were going into Sierra Leone as British soldiers. How can they just capture people and take them away? Obviously they were doing illegal things, but wouldn't they have to work with that government to make sure that all that works together?
Yeah,
I would just go into another country and kidnap their people, whether they're criminals or not.
Well, I would assume if it's a terrorist organization, right, then
true.
they are likely to have the go ahead, and it's also their own squadron that they're trying to rescue.
Yeah,
so,
I just don't know how the red tape with all of that is.
Yeah,
so maybe you guys can let us know.
I think you got some pull if you're the SAS. We'll put it that way.
Fair.
So let's move away from hostage rescues now and have a look at something a bit more conventional, specifically Operation Paraquet, a mission aimed at recapturing South Georgia during the 1982 Falklands War. Now, you likely haven't heard of South Georgia before, so let's give it some context before we jump in. South Georgia is an isolated lump of rock in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean, and one that is sufficiently barren that it makes the Falkland Islands look positively bustling and cosmopolitan by comparison. With a population of no more than 20 on a good day, it has more penguins than it does people, and it sits just shy of 2,000 miles from the nearest major landmass. It was taken by the Argentinians on the 19th of March 1982, and despite being strategically useless and all but abandoned, then British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher wasn't having any of it. She decided a good shoeing was in order, and thus she dispatched the SAS and others to see said shoeing administered. The SAS's first task was one of pure reconnaissance. They were to get onto the island, have a look about, and make extensive notes on what they saw to aid a later assault. But even by their extreme standards, the task was a most arduous one. At that time of year on South Georgia, the temperature dipped between a high of -3 and a low of -9, and thanks to its remote position in the world, the strong winds of the Atlantic blew up undeterred at speeds of up to 100 miles an hour consistently in its worst spots, which, with the wind chill, brought the effective temperature down to as low as -35 Celsius. Undeterred by something as trivial as lethally cold temperatures, however, the SAS made their preparations to land on the island, and soon enough, Mountain Troop D Squadron was inserted onto Fortuna Glacier by helicopter. They had chosen this spot specifically because of its remote nature, reasoning that it was sufficiently far from enemy positions that they would evade detection during insertion, but they quickly encountered a bit of a big problem. Even by the known standards of the island, the weather was simply horrendous. The island was in the midst of a huge storm, and with it came even colder, even windier, and even more lethal conditions than normal. They persevered, however, even after this absurd wind took their tents far off into the distance, never to be seen again, successfully navigating deep crevasses they could barely see for the thickness of the rain and surfaces made lethally slippery by moisture. But, as hard as they were only human, and quickly realized Mother Nature had no intention of letting them make it to their objective alive, and so, after 15 hours of trying to navigate and survive, they called for an evac.
15 hours.
Came another problem. 3 Wessex helicopters had been dispatched to pick them up, 2 of which crashed in the whiteout conditions that had taken hold of the island. But the troopers on the ground, frostbitten and battered though they were, managed to pull the crews out of both helicopters and get themselves and everyone else on board the final severely overloaded helicopter, and they retreated back to safety without casualty.
Jeez.
Despite this setback, the SAS eventually managed to successfully get its troopers on the island and completed their reconnaissance mission despite nature's best efforts. And then, when the time came to fight for the island, it actually proved quite the underwhelming affair in comparison. The SAS, along with some colleagues from the SBS, the SAS's naval equivalent, and some Royal Marines, formed an ad hoc unit of 79 men and made for the main Argentinian garrison, which surrendered after 15 minutes without firing a shot after 2 Royal Naval frigates, Antrim and Plymouth, fired a little demonstration barrage right on their doorstep to, well, encourage them to give it up as a bad job. This was followed by the Argentinian secondary garrison on the other side of the island the next day, bringing the islands back under British control. While certainly a bit less action-y than Operation Nimrod and Barras, Operation Paraquet was certainly no less crazy.
Those weather conditions are crazy.
Yeah, they were. And I mean, I totally, acknowledge what they did in rescuing, the 2 choppers that crashed and the crew that was with it. Well, they didn't rescue the helicopters, obviously, but they rescued the crew. That's what I'm getting at. But so kudos to them for doing that. And obviously they had a successful mission in the long run. But to me, I'm kind of like, I want to know what was so important about that island, right? Like,
well, especially to have to move that quickly, you couldn't wait until the storm was over. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And, maybe just, send in more of a, naval fleet or something like that to take care of it. Obviously, Argentinian forces were not looking to, have any conflict, right? So
yeah, and it didn't seem like they had any hostages. There was no pressing matter to me.
So it makes me think that there's something more valuable on that island that
than they're letting on
being
to.
Told to send in the special forces, right? And I just kind of, because my thought about it is, it seems like a lot of risk for such high value assets in the SAS. You lose some of these guys.
Yeah.
What if that whole mission had went downhill and you had lost them, and those are assets to your country that are very, very valuable. And is it worth the risk in that instance? I don't know. I'm just kind of at a loss as to why they chose to
use them specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah, to handle that problem. Yeah, for sure.
Paraquet was certainly no less crazy. For our last crazy SAS operation, let's have a look at the raid on Sidi Haneish airfield. Occurring all the way back on the 26th through the 27th of July 1942, when the SAS was but a nascent thing freshly born into the world, it represents the very apex of what the SAS was and is all about. Double-quicking it into something tricky, making a mess, blowing stuff up, and getting out again with the speed of muck off a shovel. The operation was simple in its aim. It was to be a bold strike right at the heart of the Axis's aerial capabilities. The SAS, transported by the long-range desert group, would embark on a multi-hundred-mile-long arduous trek through the desert, right through the very terrain that the Axis forces believed no soldier would ever be foolish enough to try and traverse, catch them with their pants down as a result at the titular airfield, which sat at the northwesternmost corner of Egypt, destroy the aircraft that they could get their hands on as the gunmen ran around, flustered, unable to muster a response, and then, by the time they got their act together and the shooting started to get serious, get out of there and escape back over the desert. For this, they would be led by none other than Major David Sterling, the legendary founder of the SAS, who by that point had already earned himself something of a reputation amongst Axis forces, who dubbed him the Phantom Major.
The Phantom
Initially,
Major.
all went well. They'd crossed the desert without incident, or as little incident as one can reasonably expect in such terrain, and having the shimmering silhouette of the airfield in the distance, Sterling ordered his men to scatter and hide out of view of approaching aircraft, with the attack slated to commence once darkness fell over the desert. And sure enough, that's exactly what Sterling did. And so, when the edge of the sun dipped beneath the horizon, Sterling signaled to all of his men to emerge from cover and gather around him, and they all went over the plan one last time. That plan was a simple one. The 18 jeeps he had at his disposal, each of which was brimming with multiple Vickers K machine guns and manned by the handiest of lads, would attack en masse in a great V formation, with orders to break off and cause chaos independently once they penetrated the airfield's perimeter. Almost immediately, however, Sterling found himself sporting a pair of brown underpants, because as soon as his convoy was underway, the airfield lit up like a Christmas tree. Fearing that they'd been rumbled, Sterling ordered the convoy halted so that he could assess the situation, at which point he was able to deduce that, luckily for him, it was just a solitary Luftwaffe bomber coming in to land. Having figured this out, he ordered his lads to keep their heads down, and they would continue the attack once the airfield descended back into darkness. That time came soon enough, and so Sterling shot a single green flare into the sky to signal to his boys that they were back on, and soon,
Go time.
one last sprint through the sand, all hell broke loose. They broke through the perimeter fence with ease, at which point the jeeps broke off and started unloading at everything important they could find. The jeeps, each touting at least 4 machine guns and having an ample amount of explosives that could be chucked overboard, were reducing planes to scrap in mere seconds. And the drivers got some lucky shots off because Sterling, in his infinite wisdom, had noticed that it only took one hand to steer a jeep, so he'd fitted all of his with handy little contraptions that let his drivers get off some shots with their spare hand. Eventually, the troopers spent all their ammunition, and it was time to scarper. And so, with Sterling launching another flare into the air to mark the raid's end, the jeeps all turned and made for the hole in the fence that they'd made only minutes earlier. They made for a very smooth and brisk exit, one that was delayed only by the actions of one Captain Paddy Main. For you see,
Paddy.
he had a spare bomb left, and the thought of wasting perfectly good explosives troubled him dearly, so he quickly pulled his jeep over to throw it into the cockpit of a surviving HE-111 for good measure, and then made for the exit with the rest of his lads as it blew up behind him. And he probably didn't look at it, because he's extremely cool. All in all, the raid was a roaring success. Sterling and his boys had destroyed 37 enemy aircraft in a matter of minutes, although tragically, 2 of these brave souls, acting Second Lieutenant Andre Zimheld and Lance Bombardier John Robson, didn't make it home and were lost to enemy fire.
Over 30 planes? Well, they certainly did their job, and tactical supremacy was on display right from the get-go with the SAS. You could see that they are really, just like flare, go, do it all, get it all done, do the work, blow up all these planes, and then flare, we're out of here. Like, that's
like, peace.
That's pretty sick.
Also, like this guy, hey, I got 1 bomb left, so might as well blow something else up on my way out.
Yeah, that's something from a movie, right? You toss
Literally.
the thing, and it's like, hey, I'm out of here. In the background, it's going off. So, 1942, they've been doing their thing for a long time.
Yeah, they're very impressive for sure.
Yeah, and comes back to, there's only a few groups in the world that are, we did, the 5 most elite special forces and got a glimpse into some of them. And the SAS was one of them. And you can see why, tactically, when you got something that only a few individuals can handle, you're going to give these guys a call.
Yep, for sure. And I liked this video. Like, I thought the host did a good job explaining it, and I liked all the visuals. So all in all, I thought the video itself was good as well.
Yeah, although I think we only did we do 5? Because I think we did 4.
No, we did 5.
Did we? Oh, because
I think we did 5.
He said 4 in the beginning, and I was thinking it said 5. Anyways.
Oh, yeah. Maybe I don't know.
So we checked out some of the craziest SAS operations, and if there's other videos for the SAS that you guys want us to check out, please let us know down below in the comment section. We appreciate your insights. Make sure you hit the like button so this video reaches more people. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. We got more military videos on the channel, as well as many others. So hopefully we see you on our next video.
Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.